All right, thank you. Dear Lord, we so thank you for the opportunity to come together to study your word in depth. As many people celebrate today as International Women's Day, we celebrate this group of women who lead us, inspire us, and allow us to lean upon each other. Be with Deanna today as she leads us in the study of Daniel and help us to be a blessing to others this week and next when we're off. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, good morning. Welcome back to our study on Daniel, Hope for the Faithful. We are in lesson 7, which is chapter 6, in the lion's pit. So before we get there, let's think about what we did last lesson. All right, who was king last lesson? Belshazzar, right? And we talked about the history that leads to Belshazzar, and he was maybe king rather than actual king, but he's ruling in Babylon. And what did it mean for Belshazzar to drink from the temple vessels? We remember they had a party, sounded like a drunken party. They called for those temple vessels and drank from them and praised the gods of, it's the long list, right? Gold and silver and brass and wood and stone, right? And what did that mean for Belshazzar to behave in that way?
Very disrespectful.
Okay, disrespectful. Mary, what did you say?
It defiled the things that had been dedicated to God and to his worship and sacrifices.
To defile what is sacred to God, what is set apart to God. Yeah. Anne, did you start to say something?
No, thank you.
Anyone else? What else struck you about that?
They couldn't touch what was holy.
Yeah.
Drinking it from it.
The practice for the Israelites, they weren't even allowed to touch what was holy. This was in the holy place where only the priests would go. It had the light of the lampstand to shine on the bread that showed the presence of God. There was all of this meaning to every little piece, how the flower cups were shaped, what was engraved on it, that it was made of pure gold. And Belshazzar just indulged himself with all of that, didn't he? We've seen king after king set himself up against the Lord of heaven, and we saw Belshazzar do that. He did not recognize the sovereignty of God, which Daniel has been really hammering home to us, right? That God is sovereign. And God thereby ended the Babylonian kingdom, as he has been saying he would do from that first dream of Nebuchadnezzar's, right? And we see that happened in God's timing. It did not happen immediately, but that regime came to an end. We saw the fall of Babylon. Now, one thing we didn't talk about last week is who took over when Belshazzar, it says that very night he was killed. We don't get the details how. We really want to know that, right? I do. We don't. That wasn't the concern of the author. But it says that someone came over, and there's a discrepancy between what I presented to you and what this text says. So let's start in the text. Someone read for us 5:30 through 6:2, just those 3 verses.
That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss.
Okay, thank you. All right, who does the text say took over? Darius the Mede. Okay, this is one of the major points of confusion or disconnect in the historical content of Daniel. We've talked about how there are some problems. One of them was we started the very beginning, the way that it described the first year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. You just can't really fit that together with the years that things happened in the rest of Scripture and in secular history. Those all match, and then Daniel's a little different. And here we have Darius the Mede. So first of all, what's a Mede? Who are the Medes? Anyone have? They weren't the Persians, right? Okay, I like that answer. Media was an empire that was contemporary with the Assyrian and Babylonian empires. And so I've tried to make a little map here, and I don't know, I didn't have good markers, y'all, so I apologize to those online because I don't think this is very visible. These are the best markers I could do. It's bad. I'll talk through it. Okay. So way back in the day, Assyria was the world power. Y'all remember that? That's who took the northern kingdom of Israel into exile in 722 BC. So Assyria is where everything is at for a long time. But in 609 BC, so we have these growing powers of Babylon and the Medes. And in 609 BC, these two allied in order to overthrow Assyria. And they basically divided up the land from that point. The former Assyrian Empire was divided between the Babylonians and the Medes, with the Babylon in central Mesopotamia and points west, and then the Medes in north and east Mesopotamia. Okay, and I'm simplifying a little bit because there were some areas in the west, including Jerusalem, that weren't under anybody's secure control. They were contested by Egypt for a time, and then they came under Babylon's full control, right? So, but basically they split it up, and Babylon and Media were contemporary empires, okay? Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon when Judah goes into exile, right? This is the beginning of Daniel, is Nebuchadnezzar. During his reign, someone named Cyrus the Great comes to power as king of Persia, and he is a descendant of both Media and Persian royalty. And so it kind of gives him a unique position. And Media falls to Persia. Persia takes over Media in 550 BC. So by the time we get down to Nabonidus, the king, and Belshazzar, the crown prince and regent, there's no more Media. Media is gone. Media has been absorbed into the Persian Empire. So we do get a little sense of this in Daniel, because Daniel calls Darius the Mede, but then they talk about the laws of the Medes and Persians like they're kind of a joint empire, and they kind of are. Persia has taken over. Eventually, Persia comes in and takes over Babylon too, and then Persia is the reigning power until Alexander the Great of Greece begins to chip away and then conquer completely this empire. And that's 300s, before that happens. So Persia is the power for some time here. So when we say Darius the Mede, this seems to be set when Babylon falls, which is in 539 BC. We're a little confused, right? So people make sense of this in a couple of different ways. One way is that well, he's the king of both, and they just mean Persia because it's the Medes and the Persians. Okay, so we can kind of roll with that. Why is it Darius? There's no one called Darius in this very time period. Now, 2 kings later, there is a Darius. Darius the first, Histaphes, becomes king in 522 BC, and he actually divides the Persian Empire into satrapies. Right? Linda just read that Darius divided it into satrapies. Now, it gets a little confusing because he divided it into 20 or possibly up to 27 satrapies, and how many does our text say?
120.
120. So we just have historical disconnect. So some think that maybe there's just some mix up and we're talking about this guy. Some think that maybe Darius is an alternate name for Cyrus the Great, who comes in and conquers. It's not attested. We don't have any inscriptions or encyclicals or documents that say that. And maybe some people think that Darius is named for one of the generals that Cyrus the Great left in charge of Babylon after this conquering period. Also, we don't really have good evidence that he was also called Darius. He has another name, and I've forgotten what it was. I know y'all would remember that. If you had that name, you would remember it forever. But I have forgotten. So you see, we have here's our historical puzzle because we have a mismatch. All right. We've seen over and over that Daniel, the author of Daniel, the book, is a lot more concerned with symbols and their meanings and with communicating theological truth than getting all of the details of the history right. Okay, this fits with the genre of apocalyptic literature, as we've talked about. I just don't want to let it go unsaid today because this is such a confusing point, and it can be discouraging when we go well, but I thought the Bible was reliable. Well, the Bible is reliable. The Bible is from God. It's authoritative for faith and practice. And yet, we have this difficulty that we don't want to pretend is not there. If we had a poem, we wouldn't hold metaphor against the historical accuracy of our poem, would we? We have to consider the genre. And so that's, I think, where we land with this puzzle in Daniel, is that the genre of Daniel is all about telling us stories that tell us who God is and who we are as human beings, as God's people, as other nations within the reign of the sovereign God. And so, sometimes scripture has historical difficulties. Sometimes we make more archaeological discoveries and it all gets straightened out, and that's really kind of fun. But sometimes we recognize the genre and purpose of the writing tell us something true, but not in the way we expect, right? Not fair to put a modern expectation of historical communication on an ancient apocalyptic communication from another culture. Questions or comments on that?
I found my footnote, and one interesting thing, that Daniel is about 80 years old at this time. And that just really surprised me.
Right, this is a big gap. Yeah. Daniel's a young man here, and Nebuchadnezzar's reign began. Oh, let me give you that.
And to think how consistent he has been in his worship to God. He's 80 years old now.
Yeah.
He's not waiting for that.
Yeah. 605 to 539, and Daniel was already a young adult, youth at this point.
About 80, or over 80.
Yeah. And so we do have it placed in a historical period, which is, the details, little confusion. How does that sit with y'all? Okay. Well, we can always talk more.
Maybe
Joyce.
I just missed this somewhere, but what are the
Satrapies. Okay. So the satrapies are provinces, but that is a word that was characteristic of the time. And satraps are governors of the satrapies, the provinces.
So it's not a person?
A satrap is a person
Okay, that's what I was
who
thinking,
governs
that it was
a
like
satrapy.
So earlier when you were talking, I was like, well, maybe like we have governors over our state.
Exactly. That is exactly the case.
Divided up into little.
Yes.
How do you spell the province for satrapy?
I think it's just satrap with an IES, I think. And sometimes it will say provinces. So your translations will make different decisions about whether to convey that word in kind of the original word, the satrap, or to translate it to like administrator, governor, some different word. Yeah, so he divided, provinces with each with a provincial governor, a satrap. What else? Anything else? Okay, let's read Daniel 6, 3 through 15. Anne, could I call on you to read that?
Yes, starting in 3.
Yes, please.
Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." Continue. I didn't hear.
To 15.
To 15.
Yes.
So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, "Oh, King Darius, live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to the king and said to him, "Remember, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed."
Okay, thank you. All right. So we see that in the opening pieces, Linda read and continuing into the part that Anne read, that we have kind of a hierarchy of governors, right? You've got all the provincial governors, and then you've got these 3 administrators over them, and so it says, so that the king might not suffer loss. So what are they watching for? This is checks and balances, right? What are they preventing?
Traitors.
Okay, traitors, theft, fraud, corruption of all kinds, right? This is the checks and balance system that they got, where they're supposed to be preventing corruption. And Daniel, how is his career going? Oh yeah, he's on top, right? Why is he on top?
Because he's not corrupt.
He's not corrupt. He's neither corrupt nor negligent, right? What else does it say? Let's look. I want you to look at verse 3. Why? He's distinguished himself how?
Exceptional.
Okay, anyone have something different than exceptional qualities?
Extraordinary spirit.
Yes, extraordinary spirit. It literally uses the word spirit, ruach. The spirit. Remember how many times it said about Daniel? A spirit, what? Of the holy gods, or a spirit of God is in him. And now we see it's because of his exceptional spirit, his ruach, the exceptional spirit that he has distinguished himself. And so what's the king's plan for Daniel?
Set him up over the whole kingdom.
Just make him head guy, right? This reminds us, who else became second in the kingdom only to Pharaoh?
Joseph.
Joseph, right? Yeah, this is that we knew we were going to have echoes of Joseph. It's the exile in the foreign court, right, all the way through, and here we see them again today. And how do the commissioners, as the NASB puts it, or the administrators, as NIV, and the satraps feel about this?
They don't like it because they probably are skimming a little bit.
She is so smart.
Get Daniel to do that.
Okay, they don't like it. Maybe the corruption that's being watched out for is present in some of their administrations. Yeah, what else?
Jealousy of his success.
Right, it
There's
seems
Anne Haley.
like jealousy. Yeah, we definitely get this, like, they're don't like him, and we have to read between the lines, but it does seem like they're jealous, right? They resent him being placed over them. And how many of them are we talking about? Just in the terms of the story. I know I gave you some historical, but let's deal with the story as it is. 120 plus the ones over them. So like, this is a lot of officials, right? It looks like it's quite a mob, and they scurry around, and what is their conclusion? How are they going to deal with this?
I'm gonna make a law.
Oh.
Shades of Esther.
Definitely shades of Esther, right? The exile in the foreign court, that model, definitely. What are they going to have to make a law about? Verse 5. What's Daniel's vulnerability?
His love for the Lord.
His love for the Lord, it says it's going to have to be about the law of his God. So Daniel's in there, he's having to work for the overlord government, but he's in there doing his best, right? He's not being lazy. He's not doing as little as possible. He's not negligent or corrupt. His service is reflecting his diligence and his wisdom, right? Who he is in character is being reflected in the work he's done, even though it's for the Babylonian government. And they say, well, so we can't get him on anything. It's going to have to be about the practice of the faith, the law of his God, right? So they all head over to the king. Verse 6 will say, as a group, I think in most of your translations, or by agreement. This is literally in a tumult, or as a throng. So, you can picture this giant group of government officials, this great mass thronging to the king, right? And what's the law that they should propose?
No one can pray to anyone but King Darius.
Okay, no one
For
can.
30 days, though.
Okay.
30 days.
Only 30 days, right? It's temporary. And no one can do what exactly? What does your translation say in, let's see. I got to switch over to this translation.
No man during the next 30 days.
Okay.
And it can be revoked.
Okay. The NIV says pray.
Okay.
But this is literally, no one shall ask an ask. No one shall request a request. It's two words that have the same root. When we see these languages, when they do that, we get a sense of emphasis, right? No one shall ask an ask. Does this sound specifically religious? I mean, the NIV makes it sound specifically religious, but if I tell you that it's ask and ask, does it sound religious?
No.
So is this practical? You've got all these sub-government. He's got a hierarchical government. People got to be asking asks all the time, right? Requesting requests has to be an ongoing thing, right? So, and historically, Persians were known to be tolerant of religions and the gods of multiple people, and they normally wouldn't have done anything like this. So we get a real sense of contrast between how a government works, the culture of the Persian government. So how do we think they talked to the king into this? I mean, Sharon said one of it, it's only temporary, right? What else?
Well, it sounds logical that he's the one that they would go to ask for things.
Right, because why would it be logical?
He's the king.
He's so great. Oh, King live forever, right? So there's, I think, maybe a sense of flattery here. Maybe they're using some flattery to accomplish this. What else, Sharon?
Well, I'm having a thought in my head that when you say it's an ask of an ask, which doesn't sound religious, but the relationship between Daniel and God is a religious act, because not they don't know that he was asking God for anything. He was worshiping God. He was praising him. You know, there are a lot of things to do in prayer, so they are misconstruing the relationship that Daniel has with God over a relationship anyone would have with that king.
Was that audible on the computer?
Well,
Okay. Good. Sometimes it's not, and I repeat it, but that was really, you said it better than I would repeat it, so I wanted to. Okay, so yeah, so there's a sense that like maybe they're misconstruing relationship, or maybe they're taking a little piece of the relationship and taking advantage of it, right? And so I kind of wonder if it's maybe by overwhelming numbers that they talk the king into this, right? They show up en masse as a throng and they say, we all already decided. Right? And we know all of the administrators didn't already decide because I'm pretty sure they didn't consult Daniel. Right? He was not part of the clique, right? That's, we all decided. So they, or maybe, you know, when we think about it in a sense of storytelling, maybe the king is supposed to look the fool here for falling for this, right? Because he's talked into it by the throng or by flattery or by the
Peer pressure.
Somehow, you know, is he the clown in the court when he should be the king? And that's how bad things happen, you know? So Daniel, you know, he is in a difficult position. Now, does Daniel appear to know what's going on while it's happening?
no, he just sits where.
He wasn't part of the club that says we all want it, and yet.
I think he did know, because he wouldn't have opened his window and prayed with an open window so they could see.
But that could have been his regular routine. You know, he probably prayed with his window open all the time.
Oh, it does say that when he did learn that.
Okay, let's look at verse 10.
Yeah, he did know it.
So it says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published. So it kind of sounds like
it was happening at the time it happened, but he found out after.
it's, or he knew it was in the works, this plan that was directed against him. He knew it was in the works, and here he finds out they did it. They succeeded. They made it come to pass.
Yeah, I'm thinking some of these administrators are in different provinces. Somebody had to pull them all together and bring them into Babylon.
Had to be a revelator somewhere.
Sneaky. And so, my goodness, where are all these people gathering?
Yeah, and I think maybe they would have gathered for some kinds of festivals. I'm not sure about that. I think that's a speculation on my part.
There had to be a reason or something.
Yeah, yeah. So I wonder if Daniel knows this whole thing is going down, but definitely as soon as it's signed, it's not a secret. He knows it's been signed, right?
As a top administrator, he would get all those publications and all those documents.
They would have to post it anyway for the
Right,
common knowledge
right.
of
That would
everyone
be the
who
practice,
knows.
is to send out the royal decree, right? So
They didn't have cell phones, but they did get communication.
they did get communication out. Okay, so what does Daniel do? Verse 10.
He goes home and prays.
Yeah. So, kind of, what's your vibe about this?
He's not changing his routine.
Okay, just, yeah, he learned the decrees was published. He seems to continue. just as he had been. This was the very behavior that the officials observed in him before this. This is what they targeted.
Yeah.
No,
was
it
a
was
trap. Yeah.
this phone. This one was lit up, and there were two voices, so I think they might have been talking to each other. If anyone online wanted to break in, let me give you a space.
Well, I was just saying that it was a trap. They were there to witness him praying. So they set that up as a trap. I had one question back
Yes.
to the question of why they attacked Daniel like this, besides the jealousy and all of those things. Do you suspect, I guess I'm going by our own world today, but is there any possibility that the fact that he was an exile, was there any kind of animosity against immigrants, let's say?
It does seem that way, right? Because later, when they we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but when they spring the trap, they say, this man who's in exile from Judah, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like, and that echoes chapter 3, right? A lot of these things have been echoing chapter 3, where because who else tattled to the king? The administrators observing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And they also say these Jews that you put over provinces of Babylon. And here we say, this exile from Judah, right? So I think we're hearing some animosity towards the Jewish people, and that is common in, that happens in Esther as well. And even in the story of Joseph, when the cupbearer comes back and it's like, oh, I forgot, it's not animosity, it's more selfishness, that he's like, there was a Hebrew, he can do. So yeah, there's people are definitely identified by their ethnic group, and maybe, there seems to be some animosity in that direction.
Well, he's different. He's not worshiping their gods and their public worshiping their gods. He goes off
Right.
by himself.
And they don't like that, do they?
But
Of course
not
not.
only that, it seems like he has always had some kind of relationship with the king, and maybe closer than
them.
Yeah. So very much prejudice going on.
Yeah, and jealousy and resentment and all of those things. This is how our human hearts work, right? All of those things get woven together in a way that doesn't always, like, we couldn't always just separate it in our minds, right? Do they dislike him because they're jealous of his good career, or do they dislike him because he's an exile and a Jew? Well, it seems to be yes.
All of the above. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, Daniel had more power than they had, really, because he was one of the three that were over all of them. And
Yes.
the very idea of an exile, taking over me was not too pleasant for any of them. I wonder too.
They've had years of living that.
Right. I wonder too sometimes if what happened to people who knew about this edict in the other provinces, what they thought about it. And then I got to thinking about some of the government officials. Maybe this was easier to swallow for them because it would possibly have reinforced their authority over the lands that they had conquered. Because so many of those lands had their own gods. They were totally different from everybody else. And if you could unite their religion all under one, which would be to petition to the king only, you might have united the kingdom a little bit more and made it stronger. That might have made some government officials accept this edict a little bit easier, maybe. But I wondered, what the other people thought about it. They just go along. Well, I guess they had to, or they would have been thrown in the lines. They had to go along with it.
right? It's the same question we ask about the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set
Right,
up. What
yeah.
about all the rest of the Jews? Did they not bow and just nobody tattled on them? Or we don't know, because
Right, yeah.
Daniel the text here is pulling out these vignettes, right? We notice, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego aren't in this story. Like, it's pulling out an individual story to tell us something, it's not a parable. It's set in a real historical time, and yet it's very selective, right? It's a curated piece. So so we see we don't know what about all the other Jews, and were they praying? What about the people who would have wanted to pray to their own gods? Are they praying? Well, the trap is directed at Daniel, and so they continue to work to spring it, right? What do you see? What do you notice about Daniel's prayer? Somebody mentioned it. What does he do? How does he do this?
Gives thanks.
Ask God, oh, yeah. And
Also
he asked
much.
God for help.
Open the windows, towards Jerusalem, right? And so we think about all the images in the Psalms of people, of the exiles longing for Jerusalem, right? He's praying towards Jerusalem out of love for the holy city. So even though he's working hard in Babylon, he's diligent and not neglectful, but he loves God and God's dwelling place, and we see it coming out in his behavior, right? So, they of course they go spy on him, because that's the second half of the plan, right? And then they go tattle. That was the whole point, right? And they're keen to point out, like, they start out with verse 12, like, what do they remind the king of first? Can it be repealed, right? They're like, any man who asks, this is petitions, ask, is going to be cast in the lion's pit, right, king? And the king, he seems very oblivious here. He's like, yep, can't be repealed, everything's great, until it's verse 13, Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, right? So, and he even says, he pays no attention to you, king. This is a repeat phrase from chapter 3. These exiles, they pay no attention to you, and they will not bow to the idol that you have set up. Daniel, they say, pays no attention and prays to his own God. What is the king's reaction in verse 14?
I think he was very stressed out. I think, to me, in my mind, was reading the story, that he's close with Daniel. I mean, he's maybe not a friend, but he's a colleague, and he respects Daniel, and he is really stressed out because, well, I don't know if we've gotten to read it, but he tries to find a way to help Daniel himself.
Verse 13, verse 14, he's deeply distressed. My version says he's with great distress. And then he's determined to, you pointed out, rescue Daniel. And so, leading up to this point, we have had 7 instances of the word ask or petition. They ask and ask. Anyone who asks, anyone who petitions. Daniel's petitioning his God. It's been the repetition of that word has sort of dominated the period. And now we're switching to a new word, this word rescue or deliver. Starting in verse 14, the king is determined to rescue Daniel. Okay, let's see. Can the king rescue Daniel? Let's read 16 through 23. Will someone read that out loud?
So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king.
Through 23.
The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And then, when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God.
Thank you. Okay, kings in the ancient Near East would keep lions. It was something that was done. They would catch them in pits and then usually move them to cages. They didn't usually leave them in the pits. They would move them to cages and then release them when they were ready to hunt. And this is an Assyrian relief I'm going to share with you.
So they hunted them? They didn't use them for entertainment to watch them fight?
Not like
the Romans?
the Romans, that was many centuries later.
Oh,
Yeah,
later.
that was a practice, right? No, not to attack people usually, but usually to hunt for hunting, the sport of hunting, right?
Did they
And
eat them?
what's that?
Did they eat them?
I don't know. You can see here on this relief, this is about 100 years before the period we're in. This is actually an Assyrian relief, but you can see how, we've got some lions here that the royalty are able to chase down. Yeah. So that's neither here nor there, but I did think it was entertaining. So this word that we're getting den in most of your translations can be translated as den or pit, same word. And it appears that Daniel is thrown down in because at the end he has to be lifted out, and it's after that he was lifted out. So this is very much like the three friends, right, who are thrown into the furnace, presumably through a hole from the top, and then later they're like, I don't know, did they walk out the wood door, the fuel door? We talked about that, and it's a mysterious, we can speculate on that setup, but we definitely get echoes that tie those two stories together, don't we? And we get this, we're getting another one of these theme statements, right? Look in verse 16. So previously in our former chapters, chapter 2, we had that only the gods could reveal it, and they don't live among men, right? That was a big challenge statement for the chapter. In chapter 3, it's what God, this was said in spite, right, Nebuchadnezzar, what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? And then in chapter 4, it's until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. In chapter 5, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. We have these phrases that really jump out as theme phrases. What do we have in chapter 6? Verse 16.
It was that, may your God,
Yeah.
whom you worship continually, rescue you. Yeah.
Rescue you, right? So maybe the king couldn't find any way to rescue. But he says, may your God rescue. And notice verse 17. What do they place up at the stone, at the opening? And what do they do to it?
They seal it.
Who seals it?
The king did.
The king and the nobles. Okay, what's the purpose of this seal?
Anybody couldn't come and remove it.
Okay, so
Is that to show who placed it there, though?
Yeah, the nobles are saying, like, we witnessed it. The king actually went through with it. He didn't want to went through. It's until sundown, and then they come back and remind him. You remember the laws of the Medes and the Persians are going to be repealed, right? Like they come back and like drive it home. Like, no, you're going to have to throw him in the lion's pit, right? And so their witness, Darius went through it. They sealed the stone, and it's so that no one, implied Darius, right, the king, can sneak and help Daniel without anyone knowing it. right? Because you could break a seal. You can break a seal just fine, but people will know it.
What are these seals like? What do we envision those being?
So this would have been like usually in a ring, we would be calling it a small one, but this probably would have been a larger clay item, not a ring that is placed in
But
a
like
wax.
stamped, like they seal a letter or stuff.
Like old fashioned wax seal like that, but this would be a larger clay item that would be as a stamp. Yeah.
Would that have been similar to the signet, the seal that was put on Jesus' tomb?
So was there a seal?
Yeah, they sealed the stone.
Yes, but did
Wasn't
they
there a
seal it meaning that they
Was-
locked it, or did they seal it meaning with a?
I thought it
seal?
was just, they put a seal on it, but I may be not remembering correctly.
I don't actually know that. Someone's welcome to look that up while we talk.
But
But what's echo? You're pointing out an echo here. What is what do we hear when we hear the stone was there and it was sealed? We hear
To me,
Jesus.
I see it was sealing the hole, but it wasn't like caulked.
That's how I've always thought of it. I would have to search
And that's the same
that
as
up and
what
see.
I thought about the tomb for Jesus, that it was just placed there to seal up that
Okay.
hole.
This is definitely a signet seal
Yeah.
because you get the king's and that of his nobles. So I think it's a little different, but don't know that. Very interesting.
The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing would change.
stamp on the same thing.
So did Daniel stay in this pit for 30 days, for the rest of whatever the 30 days was? How long was he in that pit?
Right? Does he get amnesty after he's been thrown in once? He can't be thrown again. It's
Well,
like
when
not
the 30
double.
days
What
is
is
up-
that called when you can't be accused of murder twice? Like double indemnity, is that?
Well, the thing is, the ruling was only for 30 days. And so after the 30 days, then the ruling goes away.
Yes.
So then they could pull him out of the pit if he's still alive.
But how long does he actually stay in the pit?
I don't know.
Overnight, right? Okay, because what does the king do? What does the king do overnight?
He
doesn't
is
sleep, he doesn't eat, he doesn't have
He's
any
worrying about Daniel.
He's torn up. He's concerned. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't eat. He fasts from food and entertainment. These are prayer behaviors, aren't they? And so we see a real contrast. We've pointed out similarities, particularly with chapter 3, but with the other stories of Daniel all the way through. And yet here's a contrast. The king is distressed. He wants to save Daniel. He spends the night in these kind of supplication type behaviors, and what sounds like, like Esther has all the Jews fast and pray for her. Even Daniel comes into Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and says, pray for me that I'll find out what the king's dream was so we don't all get executed, right? So we have the king in that role. So it really adds something to the pattern that we have seen. It's like it fills the pattern and then it adds something more, doesn't it? And at first light, he hurries back. And what is his anguished question?
Has your God found a way to?
Could your God do it?
Oh, yeah.
Could he do it? Is God able? Right? Daniel says, oh yes, God's angel, God's messenger shut the mouth of the lions. Daniel knew God was able, right? Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They said, our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, right, we won't worship the image you have set up. So Daniel didn't know he would be delivered, but he knew God had the power to deliver him. And Darius didn't know that, right? So Daniel was lifted out, and what is Daniel's state after his night with the lions?
No wounds, nothing wrong.
No wounds, right? It's just the three friends, remember, they weren't singed and no smell of fire was on him, but Daniel, no wound is found on him. Why?
Because the angel was in there with him and shut the mouth of all the lions.
the presence of God's representative shut them out because of Daniel's what? His faithfulness, right? Linda.
Then the answer to Jesus is too.
Okay, please.
Matthew 27, verse 66. He went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting a guard. And my footnote says that sealing it was putting a cord over it and then putting clay over that.
Just like this with the signet here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, and then posting a guard, just to be sure that the disciples didn't come and take his body away.
And say he had been raised, that was their
Right.
logic.
Yes. So a seal. So we have the stone and the seal, and it echoes the tomb of Jesus. Yeah. All right, let's look at verse 24. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel, I'm reading out of the NIV. Is it false?
Well, no, because
Did he do what they said he did?
Yes, he did.
He did. So it's not false. This is this is translated this way, and a better translation would be maliciously accused.
Yes.
But the reason it's hard to translate is because it's an idiom. They had eaten the pieces of Daniel, right? They're trying to chew him up and spit him out, might be an idiom that we would use,
Like
right?
they had manipulated the situation to cause him to.
They had. It was a malicious accusation on a falsehood. They had eaten his pieces. This is the same idiom used about those who bring charges against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They ate the pieces, right? So they have maliciously accused Daniel, were brought in, and
Cast them and their wives and their children.
okay.
The whole family.
Whoa, right? Okay. We're going to talk about these two things separately. First of all, the accusers. They are cast into the lion's den. Why are the accused? We'll get to the wives and children. Why are the accusers killed?
Well, because they set this whole thing up.
Right. And maybe the king didn't like being tricked,
Right.
being made a fool of so as to threaten his favored and valued administrator. Right? The king comes out looking
A little bit better than he did initially.
yeah, but for falling for this, he doesn't look too good, right? So maybe the king didn't like that. And also, from the standpoint of a dramatic progression, what does this prove about the lions?
That they were hungry.
Oh, yeah.
Right. They weren't just tame, fat and happy, already full lions. They're actually fierce, ravenous beasts, right? They are beasts, and they fall on the accusers, overpower them, and crush all their bones, right? Dramatic moment in the scripture.
They reached the bottom.
Right? So they're not too tame or too full to, right.
But one thing, if the king had not made this measure of consequence for these men, how many other times would they come back and try to manipulate him again into something they wanted to
There
do?
is a sense of justice here. So I think what you're pointing out, this is the Torah punishment for a malicious witness, is that it should be done to a malicious witness as he intended to do to his brother. And so we have this reversal, this as you tried to do to the innocent, so it shall be done to you. We have this sense of very fierce justice, right? And once again, we see that large or small, God does not let injustice go unpunished. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but he does bring judgment.
Deanna,
Yes.
I was just wondering if the people that got thrown in, the people that were falsely accusing Daniel, was it like all 120 or more people, do we think?
It doesn't sound like it, right? I don't know. Yeah, the story kind of leaves that, it never says that it's all 120, but then they say all of us have agreed, and they go in a throng, so it seems like a lot of people.
Or is it just the nobles that put their stamp with the king?
Oh, maybe the ringleaders. We talked about ringleaders. We've got to wonder. Now let's talk about Why their wives and children?
Well, it's the Persian custom.
The ancients had a much stronger sense of corporate guilt than we do. And so this probably would not be disturbing to an ancient reader as it is to us. Now, I will say scripture doesn't necessarily condone this action, right? Just because the king did it doesn't mean it was a great thing to do. You know, King Darius is not God, right? But there are times in Israel's history when the entire family or the entire tribe or the entire Israel was held responsible and guilty for the actions of some. And yet we see as God gives the law, he begins to say only the guilty will be punished, not those around them. He begins to say through the prophets that this is not what will be. This is not God's view of the right way towards the future. You know, and right now our justice systems, they try for this, right? We try not to punish those around the guilty person for the guilty person's actions, but only the guilty. And yet with human evil, do children ever escape some terrible consequence of the evil of their parents? You know, human evil affects the community, especially the closest, the family, right? And God says that he is creating a new covenant where this will not be the case. I want to read to you from Jeremiah 31, 29 through 31. In those days, they will not say again, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge, but everyone will die for his own iniquity. Each man who eats sour grapes, his teeth will be set on edge. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And so in God's new ways, you know, he is creating a world where this will not be. And yet now, you know, we are in the in-between times. We still see the children suffer for the sins of the fathers. We see the community suffer for the evils that are done to them.
Yeah. I
Yes.
think it's very interesting in verse 21, where Daniel says, "O king, live forever," because he didn't say that previously.
Yeah. He greets the king with the traditional formal greeting of respect for the king. Yeah. But the king wasn't able to rescue Daniel. Only the presence of God's representative could do that. Okay, verse 25. King Darius then wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land. This sounds like, you know, we've had these proclamations, haven't we? Over and over, we've seen Nebuchadnezzar make these proclamations. It's always going to all the peoples and languages and nations, you know. May you prosper greatly. Traditional opening greeting. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. And now we get a poem, right? What do we do when we come to a poem in the text? We stop and read it 4 times, then we look for themes. Okay? A poem. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Okay, what themes did you hear?
The poem is just a nutshell of the whole book.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
The poem is a nutshell of the whole book, okay? Give me some.
Endures forever.
Endures forever.
Kingdom will not be destroyed. Dominion will never end.
Dominion, right? Sovereignty, dominion. These keep coming up. Yeah.
Rescues.
He rescues, he saves. This is the final. We have 5 instances of rescue in these latter verses, and this is the final instance of it. Rescues. Yeah. The emphasis is this is God is a God who rescues. What
So
else?
It seems like Darius has finally come around to believe in God.
right? He was kind of believing in God, maybe through, earlier he calls God the living God. That may be a phrase that he learned from Daniel, but he didn't know if God could really do it because he didn't really know as much as he knows about God now, after the work of God has been done in this way, right? He performed signs and wonders in the heavens and the earth. Remember that emphasis that we saw with the cosmic tree about the heavens and the earth and how God is the ruler of both. And power, right? Power is a major element that we see being explored in Daniel, and it is God's power that rescues Daniel for the power of the lions, right? This story has echoed the blazing furnace story, right? And it's built on it, right? God isn't, this decree is not just nobody say anything bad or I'll turn your houses into rubble, like Nebuchadnezzar's decree. This was must reverence and fear this God. The king is actually, acting for Daniel's good here. We see the king does seem to learn, he seems to actually, Nebuchadnezzar, did he ever really seem to get it? No, but we're seeing there's a progression. There seems to be some understanding on the part of Darius. So God is working out his purposes. And the Jewish people are still in exile. It's not done yet, but we see that God is present and active. So questions or comments on all this?
There may be a change throughout the kingdom of an attitude toward the Jews, so that in preparation for them being repatriated.
I don't know. You get down here, we still get Esther down here in the Persian story. But yes, I mean, some people appreciate the Jews for their diligence and their wisdom.
And when this decree goes out, everybody's got to at least read it and accept it.
Yeah.
And that could change over 10, 20 years. That could change attitudes enough that when they were sent back, nobody got upset that the king was sending money and sending them back.
Well, and there were some objections, but you get a sense because it's in the reign of Cyrus the Great that some Jews are sent back to rebuild with Persian funds. Yeah. So yeah, definitely good point. What else? What else do you notice?
But does it take 70 years to change an attitude of a country? No. Because that's how long it took here. Yeah.
The work of God is sometimes much slower than we would want or that we understand. Our lives are short, but God's is long. Well, once again, we see that God's deliverance did not take the form of preventing the trial, right? God did not keep the malicious accusers from plotting. He didn't keep people from hating Daniel or being jealous of him. He didn't keep the king from falling for it. He didn't keep the spies from seeing Daniel pray. And he didn't keep Daniel from going all the way into the lion's den. Daniel went into the fire, right? Into the mouth of the beasts because he was faithful, because he never stopped asking, seeking, petitioning God, even when jealous, malicious accusers sought to kill him for it. He went into the pit or the cave that would have been his tomb, and it was sealed with a stone, right? That sounds so familiar. And yet the messenger of God was there with him. Daniel was not alone, and in the morning the stone is taken away, and Daniel emerges miraculously alive, victorious over the evil powers because of the power of God, right? So it's such an echo, isn't it? God's representative, faithful beyond the faithfulness of those to whom he sent, a servant who keeps serving. This is Jesus' behavior, right? Mm-hmm. It's not Jesus, but it's Jesus-like. Leaders who should be serving but are instead jealous and malicious and seek to kill him, right? Didn't Jesus live through that? And die through that, right? When he goes into the grave, in the tomb, sealed with a stone, an angel in attendance, and he came forth not after one night, but after 3 days in the tomb, victorious. So these echoes of Jesus tell us who God is. God is with his servants, and he himself serves and sacrifices himself most of all. The world is petty and malicious, right? We see it in big ways and we see it in small ways. And faithful servants are often targets of that. They want, these people want to eat the pieces of the faithful. But notice that the world wants to pit these things against each other. Faithful service to your community, the world wants to pit that against religious integrity, but God says all that goes together. God places us where we are so that we can serve as Daniel did, as Jesus did, right? And remain faithful through the trials and overcome through his presence. So thank you all. Great discussion today. I really enjoyed it. Next week, we are off for spring break. So no class at all next week. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be in Daniel chapter 7. Thank you. And then just turn it back on.
Thank you, Deanna. And thank you again to Janelle for our snacks today. They were delicious. Does anybody have any additions to the prayer that Mary's going to give? All right.